Beneath the desert winds of Nevada, silence hid a secret that the world was never meant to uncover. In the winter of 1887, railroad men unearthed a pit of bones, 97 women arranged in grotesque order, each bearing the same marks of violence. The graves stretching like a ledger of the damned, every skeleton another entry in a history written in silence and blood. The report was sealed, the witnesses reassigned, and the truth buried deeper than the bodies themselves. But some things refused to stay underground. These women were not the victims of drunken miners or wandering outlaws. Their killers wore silk gowns, jeweled brooches, and welcoming smiles. They were 4 sisters: Greta, Wilhelmina, Margaret, and Adelaide Everhart, who came to Silver Creek under the guise of refinement, bringing gaslight elegance into a dust-choked town of desperate men. And behind lace curtains and velvet carpets, they ran a slaughterhouse disguised as sanctuary, a brothel where women entered seeking survival and never left. Before we step inside the Golden Rose and uncover the Everhart Sisters' dark secret, don't forget to subscribe and let us know in the comments what state you're listening from. Because the shadows of history still hold many more stories like this one. The sisters' genius was not in bloodshed but in deception. They built the Golden Rose like a spider spins its web, beautiful, alluring, and impossible to resist. They offered wages, respectability, and protection. They wrote letters to families, weaving lies with such precision that no one questioned when daughters, sisters, or wives vanished. Each disappearance was explained, every absence accounted for, every silence smoothed over, until the desert itself swallowed the truth. What made their story more terrifying than the grave they left behind was not only their crimes, but how easily they hid in plain sight, how the law, the church, and the town's leaders turned blind eyes. Some through bribes, some through convenience, and some simply because they could not imagine women capable of such precise evil. That blindness became their greatest weapon. And here is where you must listen closely, because the story of the Everhart Sisters is not just a relic of the past. It is a reflection, a reminder that the most dangerous predators do not wear masks or carry guns. They shake your hand, they smile at you, they welcome you in, and by the time you realize what you've stepped into, it is already too late. Her name was Maria Fernandez, 19 years old, a girl who dreamed only of feeding her family. In the summer of 1870, she saw an advertisement in the Carson City Daily Appeal. Young ladies of good character sought for respectable domestic service in a prosperous mining town. Room, board, and fair wages provided. The words promised safety, dignity, and a chance to climb out of the poverty that suffocated her parents and siblings, and she answered with hope, never knowing it was a death sentence. Maria's letter, later discovered among the Everhart sisters' personal papers, spoke of desperation dressed in politeness, explaining her mother's illness, her father's broken work, and the siblings who depended on her. To her, the Golden Rose was salvation. To the sisters, she was prey. Margot responded with warmth, words that melted fear, promising Maria $4 a week, twice the going rate for Mexican girls, and a private room already prepared, even arranging her journey and sending someone to meet her at the general store in Silver Creek. It was flawless manipulation, hospitality as a lure, kindness as the cage. Maria arrived in August, and at first her letters home spoke of comfort. The sisters were kind, the building clean, her duties manageable, and she believed she had found her place. But then the tone shifted. Her letters mentioned restrictions, less frequent contact with home, movements curtailed, her room exchanged for a windowless chamber in the basement. She described hearing noises in the night, groans, dragging sounds, muffled cries that Adelaide dismissed as rats. Her final letter came on September 12th, in which she wrote of 2 other young women, training, though she was forbidden to speak to them. And then, silence. Her father Diego spent what little he had to reach Silver Creek, confronting the sisters in desperation. Greta smiled with cold sympathy, explaining that Maria had suddenly left for San Francisco with a wealthy family offering twice the wages, even producing a forged letter in Maria's hand to prove it. Broken and powerless, Diego left empty-handed, his instincts screaming the truth he could not prove, and he would never see his daughter again. Maria was the first entry in the sisters' hidden ledger of death, but she was far from the last. The machine was working, and Silver Creek had not yet realized it was feeding on its daughters. Maria Fernandez vanished, and the desert swallowed her name. Yet the sisters didn't stop. They had perfected a rhythm, and soon the pattern became undeniable, if anyone had cared to see it. Women kept arriving, answering letters written in Margot's graceful script, each promise of wages and respectability carefully tailored to the desperation of the reader. Young women from broken homes, widows seeking stability, immigrant daughters fleeing poverty, they came one by one, hopeful alone, and perfectly vulnerable. Each was greeted with refinement. Adelaide's smile, Greta's authority, Wilhelmina's ledger, Margot's warmth. Each was housed first in the upstairs chambers, later, always for some practical reason, moved to smaller, darker rooms. Letters home became infrequent, excuses followed, and at last, silence. Within a year, at least a dozen women had disappeared under identical circumstances, yet no one admitted the truth. Silver Creek was thriving, and the Golden Rose was its crown jewel, its restaurant a place of elegance for wives, its brothel a discreet refuge for powerful men. The sisters gave the town what it wanted most: order, beauty, and pleasure. In return, the town gave them silence. When worried fathers or brothers arrived, Greta handled them with calm authority, producing forged letters, inventing tales of lovers, or turning grief into shame. Are you sure she wasn't living a double life? Perhaps she left by choice. Men, unwilling to believe worse, departed defeated, while Silver Creek carried on. The greater horror was not only in the killings, but in the system surrounding them. The sisters understood psychology, how kindness could erode resistance, how trust could be dismantled step by step. Even the mind's endless hammering and blasts became useful, muffling every cry for help that might have risen from the basement chambers of the Golden Rose. By 1872, whispers had begun, girls vanishing after working for the sisters. But those who spoke too loudly found themselves ruined, trapped in debts, or branded as liars by the town's elite. The sisters weren't merely killers, they were rulers, shaping the narrative and crushing opposition with the weight of reputation. Silver Creek congratulated itself on prosperity, blind to the truth. Its wealth was built on blood. To understand the Everhart sisters, one must not see them as four women, but as a single machine with four faces, each serving a role in control, manipulation, and destruction. Greta, the eldest, was the architect, the authority who carried herself with the dignity of privilege, speaking with inevitability as if every choice had already been decided. To employees, she was the law. To outsiders, the matron who granted the Golden Rose respectability. Every lie began with her voice. Wilhelmina, the second, was the bookkeeper, cold and precise, recording names, wages, fabricated letters, even dates when girls stopped writing home. She calculated how long families would wait before asking questions, studied backgrounds for weaknesses, and decided which lie would wound least when it came time to erase someone. Margot, the third, was the voice of sympathy, playing the confidante, the older sister, the friend who soothed frightened girls, whispering that suffering was temporary and opportunity lay ahead. Her charm disarmed suspicion, her warmth softened resistance, her lies made obedience easier. Adelaide, the youngest, was the lure, a beauty so unearthly in the dust of the frontier that men adored her and women trusted her. She drew potential victims with soft questions and sympathetic smiles, promising companionship, yet behind her eyes lay cruelty that surfaced the moment trust was secure. Together they operated as a cycle: lure, charm, control, erase. Each disappearance was mechanical, not random. Families were deceived, records falsified, rumors redirected, until the victim ceased to exist, her place in the world neatly folded like a page removed from a book. What made the sisters monstrous was not only violence but precision. Violence was their conclusion, control was their art. Beneath the polished wood and velvet mirrors of the Golden Rose lay another world. The basement, a labyrinth carved from earth, damp with seepage and reeking of iron and mildew. Lanterns swung like prison bars across the walls. Here, victims were relocated under excuses of renovations or temporary arrangements, stripped of privacy, possessions taken, letters censored. Rooms had no windows, doors locked from outside. A single iron grate carried faint sound upward, but the saloon's laughter drowned every cry. Wilhelmina's notes tracked how quickly a girl broke, how many days before she stopped asking about her family. Margot provided gentle lies. Adelaide distracted men upstairs. Greta enforced the rules. The basement became a theater of cruelty. Some starved into obedience. Others threatened with debts they could never repay. When deemed no longer useful, they vanished. Evidence was scarce, but later fragments revealed blood scrubbed into stone, bones behind walls, shallow graves in the sagebrush. One miner swore he saw the sisters dragging sacks into the desert at night, the shapes inside unmistakably human. Yet no one in Silver Creek demanded answers. The Golden Rose thrived, the men were entertained, money flowed. The basement remained untouched, a silent tomb beneath pleasure. The sisters understood that killing a body was simple, killing a memory, a trace, a name, that was mastery. And in the shadows below the Golden Rose, they perfected it. Her name was Clara Walsh, a 19-year-old farmer's daughter from New Mexico. She came to Silver Creek with nothing but a carpetbag and her mother's locket, drawn by Margot's elegant letter that promised steady wages and safety at the Golden Rose. To Clara, it seemed like a chance to escape poverty and begin anew. Instead, it became her prison. At first, she was dazzled by the parlor's velvet curtains, Adelaide's beauty, Greta's poise, the dresses loaned to her, and the sense of belonging that felt intoxicating. She even wrote letters home, telling her mother not to worry. But within weeks, her words were intercepted. When she asked why her pay was being withheld, Wilhelmina explained coldly that her expenses exceeded her wages, and just like that, Clara was already in debt. Soon she was moved to the basement. When she protested, Margot soothed her. "It's just until renovations upstairs are finished. Don't be afraid, darling. We take care of our own." But the truth revealed itself quickly. Her door was locked each night. Meals arrived late and smaller. The girls who had come with her vanished one by one, their names never spoken again. Clara clutched her locket and prayed. She tried to resist, once pounding the walls and screaming until her throat bled. But the saloon's music swallowed her cries. Another time she refused to eat, only to be dragged into the corridor by Greta, while Adelaide smiled faintly, her angelic face twisted with cruelty. "You'll eat or you'll starve," Greta hissed. "Either way, you'll obey." And Clara obeyed. Her last days were spent in silence, holding her locket, whispering prayers to no one who listened. The sisters had broken her spirit. Then, one night, her room was empty, the cot stripped bare, the locket gone. In the ledger, her name was simply crossed out. Weeks later, her mother received a letter claiming Clara had eloped with a musician. The handwriting was perfect, the lie flawless. But it wasn't Clara's. It was Margot's. Clara Walsh had been erased as neatly as chalk from a slate. Silver Creek was a mining town built on greed, and in such places, silence could be bought as easily as whiskey. For months, the Golden Rose thrived, its music and laughter drowning the unease beneath. But whispers began to spread. Miners spoke of girls gone missing, letters that never arrived. Families turned away at the door. A laundress whispered about bloodstains on dresses that defied explanation. A coal boy claimed he heard screams when the saloon fell quiet. Yet, no one confronted the sisters. Their beauty, their wealth, and their charm shielded them. The sheriff, drunk on their coin, looked the other way. The town's ministers chose silence rather than cross the women who financed half their church repairs. Still, fear crept in. Some miners refused to let their sisters near the saloon. A few families fled town entirely. But whenever the whispers grew too loud, Adelaide appeared radiant and untouchable, her beauty blinding doubt. And so Silver Creek became complicit, not because they approved, but because they chose blindness over truth. The first real challenge came from outside. In the autumn of 1881, Thomas Hale rode into town. A former Pinkerton agent with a scarred cheek and a reputation for finding the missing. He carried a letter from Clara's mother, a woman who knew her daughter's handwriting too well to be fooled by Margot's forgery. Hale listened in saloons, asked questions in stables, and followed wagon tracks into the desert, where he found disturbed earth and scraps of fabric. He heard every rumor, sacks dragged into the sagebrush, muffled cries through floorboards, girls who never came home, and all trails led to the Golden Rose. The sisters welcomed him like a friend. Adelaide smiled sweetly. Greta poured his drink with sharp eyes. Wilhelmina noted his every word, and Margot laughed at the absurdity of it all. But Hale wasn't deceived. He stayed, scribbling in his notebook, piecing together fragments of a nightmare. The sisters knew he was getting close. Adelaide watched him from the balcony. Greta muttered about accidents. Wilhelmina urged action. But Margot only smiled. Let him look. It will make his fall more satisfying. By winter of 1882, Hale had enough evidence to know the truth. But proving it was another matter. The sheriff was bought, the townsfolk too frightened, the ministers silent. So one night he broke into the Golden Rose. The saloon above was quiet, but below he found the basement cells, etched with names and desperate prayers. He found ledgers documenting every girl who entered and every girl who disappeared. And in a pile of rags, he found Clara Walsh's locket. But then the doors slammed. From the shadows stepped Adelaide, her beauty near divine in the lamplight, Greta circling with a knife, Wilhelmina clutching the ledger like scripture, and Margot applauding softly. "You've been very clever, Mr. Hale," she purred. "But clever men don't live long in Silver Creek." What happened next has no single truth. Some say Hale fought his way out, pistol blazing, wounding Greta before vanishing into the night. Others believe he was swallowed whole by the same darkness that claimed the girls. A few insist he escaped east, carrying the ledger to authorities. What history does agree on is this: by spring, the Golden Rose was abandoned, its windows shattered, its doors swinging loose. The Everhart Sisters were gone. Some whispered they fled to Mexico, others that they hid under new names in eastern cities. Darker tales said they still haunted the desert roads, luring the desperate with promises of fortune. Silver Creek withered soon after. The mines dried, families left, and the town sank back into dust. Yet travelers passing the ruins still claim they hear faint music drifting from the Golden Rose, or glimpse four women standing on its balcony, smiling with eyes that never age. The Everharts were never tried, never buried, never caught. They simply slipped into legend, half history, half nightmare. And their tale endures, a reminder that behind beauty can lurk horror, and in the quietest towns, the darkest secrets often lie, waiting to be uncovered. The Golden Rose had by then become more than a building. It was an institution, the cornerstone of Silver Creek's economy. And the Everhart Sisters played their roles with the elegance of actresses on a stage. By day, they walked among the town's leaders, donating to the church, hosting charity teas, even sponsoring school books for minors' children. But by night they descended into a kingdom of shadows where women screamed against walls too thick to carry their voices beyond the velvet curtains. Their crimes were not simply murder but a performance. Ritual, business, and terror braided together into something that thrived in silence, and the town, whether knowingly or not, became complicit. The mayor owed them money, the sheriff owed them favors, and the priest, uneasy as he was, chose to accept their gold in the collection plate. To question the sisters meant questioning the very foundation of Silver Creek's prosperity, and so no one did. Whispers were smothered with bribes, threats, or sudden disappearances, until the horror of the Golden Rose became like the desert wind, ever present, impossible to fight, and easier to pretend was not there. But every empire cracks, and for the Everharts, it began not with the men of Silver Creek, but with a girl named Hannah Price, just 16, who managed to slip free one night when a careless guard left a side door unlatched. Barefoot and delirious, she stumbled into the desert and found a camp of railroad workers, to whom she poured out her nightmare in fevered fragments. The faces of captives, the names etched into stone walls, the stench of bodies hidden behind velvet curtains. They carried her to a deputy not yet bought by the sisters, and though the town leaders tried to bury the scandal, the story spread like wildfire. The Golden Rose, once a jewel of refinement, became the focus of suspicion. Fathers who had lost daughters, miners who remembered strange sounds, and drifters who had seen shadows moving in the night all began connecting the threads, and suddenly the Everharts were no longer untouchable. They responded by doubling their charm, staging charity dinners, donating to the church, even performing plays where Margot wept for poor souls lost in the mines. For some, this performance restored faith, but doubt had already taken root, and by 1882 fear split Silver Creek in half. Some insisting the sisters were angels of mercy, others whispering they were demons in silk gowns. Into this divide stepped Thomas Hale, a former Pinkerton-turned-drifter who saw not rumor but patterns. Quietly he gathered testimonies, scraps of fabric, letters, and names carved into cellar walls, and with each fragment the truth sharpened, though he knew truth was useless without proof. Yet in a town where the sheriff drank Everhart whiskey, the judge played cards in their parlor, and the church sang their praises, proof meant risk, and risk meant stepping alone into the lion's den.